Welcome back to Midnight Whispers. Don't forget to subscribe, turn off the lights, and let's step into something you can't unhear. I arrived at the old boarding house after a sudden life collapse, thinking the place was just another cheap stopover. But the caretakers flinch when I asked about the vacant room at the end of the hall. Felt like the first hint of a truth too heavy to carry. They said room 13 was sealed for years, yet the key lay on the counter as if it wanted to be taken, gleaming with a quiet invitation that crawled under my skin before I even touched it. When I opened the door, the air felt wrong, not cold, not warm, just wrong, as if the space had been waiting for someone foolish enough to step inside and breathe its stale, ancient heaviness. The walls looked normal at first glance, but if you stared a little too long, the paint seemed to pulse like something alive had been sealed beneath it and was struggling to move. I laid my suitcase on the bed and noticed the mattress dipped as though someone invisible had sat beside it. And I froze, listening to the air rearrange itself in a slow, deliberate hush. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, yet a bizarre pressure settled on my chest, something between curiosity and compulsion, pulling me deeper into the suffocating stillness of that room. When I turned on the lamp, the bulb flickered and steadied, casting a dull glow that didn't quite reach the corners, as if the darkness had mass and refused to be pushed back. I tried unpacking, but the closet door creaked open on its own, revealing nothing but a single nail on the backboard where something once hung, and left behind a faint imprint shaped like a warped human face. The sink in the bathroom dripped in a rhythm that didn't match anything natural. It was slow, then fast, then impossibly still, as if responding to my heartbeat. I washed my hands to shake the tension off, and the water ran rusty for a moment, even though the pipes downstairs seemed perfectly fine when I checked them earlier. Back in the bedroom, the bedside table drawer was slightly open, and inside was a torn envelope addressed to a girl whose name I didn't recognize, stained with something too dark to be old ink. There was a note inside that said, "If you hear your own voice, don't answer," written in a shaky hand that felt like it belonged to someone who had screamed while writing. I set the note down, but as soon as my fingers left it, the room felt heavier, as if acknowledging that I had finally crossed a line I couldn't uncross. The window overlooking the courtyard had no lock, and yet, when I tried opening it for air, it refused to budge, like someone outside was holding it shut from the other side. The radiator in the corner rattled even though the heat wasn't on, creating a metallic clatter that echoed in a strangely rhythmic sequence, almost conversational. At some point, the ceiling creaked above me, slow and deliberate, even though the caretaker insisted no one lived in the room upstairs because the floorboards were too unstable to hold weight. I sat on the bed, trying to convince myself everything was explainable. But the room seemed to pulse with quiet, hungry awareness that tightened around me with every passing second. My phone glowed with a notification, even though I had no service in the building. And when I checked it, the screen simply displayed, "You're not alone." That was when the doorknob began to turn from the inside, even though I was the only one in the room. And the air behind me shifted as if something unseen had just stood up. I told myself it was just my nerves misfiring, but the doorknob kept twisting gently, like careful fingers learning how to use it, as though whatever was in the room with me had grown curious. Before I could react, the lights dimmed to a dull amber haze, and the silence grew so thick it became sound itself, vibrating between my ribs as if something inside the walls was breathing in sync with me. I stepped toward the door, but each footfall felt muffled, not by carpet, but by some invisible resistance, as though the air had thickened into something with weight. When I touched the doorknob, a pulse ran up my arm, not electricity, but a cold impression of someone's memory, like fear being handed from one palm to another. I flung the door open, expecting the hallway, but instead I saw the same room again, the same bed, the same suitcase, the same walls pulsing faintly like oversized veins. My stomach twisted because I knew I hadn't stepped backward, yet the world around me looped, trapping me inside a reflection of the place I was standing in. The ceiling light swayed even though there was no breeze, and the chain clicked softly as it moved, producing a sound that felt too intentional to be an accident. In the reflection room, the closet door was wide open now, and inside hung a dress identical to the one I was wearing, except the fabric looked soaked and heavier. I reached for it, but my hand stopped midair when I noticed something behind it, a pair of faint finger marks on the wall, like someone had clawed their way out of the plaster. The sink in the reflection bathroom was still dripping, but now every drop echoed with a low hum, stretching unnaturally long, like the sound was being pulled by invisible strings. As I leaned over the sink, my reflection didn't move with me. She stood frozen, eyes widened, lips parted as if she were about to warn me, but couldn't speak. Her expression sharpened into something pleading, and for a terrifying second, I realized she wasn't frozen. I was the one lagging, moving seconds behind my own mirror self. The walls of the reflection room trembled subtly, not like the building settling, but like something pacing behind them, dragging its weight along the beams. I backed away slowly, but my reflection followed after a full heartbeat delay. Her movements warped, as if she were trying to break free from a script written long ago. The air thickened around my throat, not choking me, but pressuring me to stay still, as if the room was studying how humans responded to fear it had already seen countless times. I tried opening the door again, and the handle burned icy against my palm, so cold it almost stung. Yet when I pulled, the door opened to yet another identical room, deeper and dimmer. The floor in this third version creaked under my steps in a way that felt like groans, almost like the boards were reacting to my presence with dread instead of strain. On the bed lay a second note, written in the same shaky handwriting as the first, saying, "If you hear footsteps behind you, don't turn around." As I read the note, something warm and gentle moved a strand of hair behind my ear, like a human touch. But I was alone, and the room was too quiet for anything living. I squeezed my eyes shut, whispering to myself that none of this was real. But the moment I opened them, I realized the suitcase on the bed was now open, and inside was a version of my own belongings, all aged by years I hadn't lived. The sight of my own belongings, aged into relics, felt like a silent accusation, as though the room was showing me a version of myself that had lived here far longer than I remembered. And the realization made my breath stutter in my chest. I lifted one of the shirts from the suitcase, and a cloud of dust rose like the residue of forgotten time, carrying a smell that reminded me of attics and abandoned hospitals, places where memories rot instead of fade. As I unfolded the fabric, something slipped out and fell to the floor with a soft thud, revealing an old photograph of me standing in that very room, wearing the same clothes I had on now, but with eyes hollowed as if something had been scooped out of them. The date scribbled on the back was from 10 years ago, a decade before I had ever stepped foot in the boarding house, making my skin crawl with the sense that my timeline had been rewritten without my consent. I backed away until my shoulder hit the wall, and the wallpaper felt warm under my skin, almost like it was breathing slowly, trying to sync its pulse with my racing heartbeat. The overhead light flickered, but not randomly. It dimmed and brightened in a deliberate pattern, like the room was trying to talk in a language built from electricity and dread. Somewhere beneath the floorboards came a dragging sound, slow and steady, like something heavy being pulled across old wood, stopping every few seconds as if listening for my reaction. I wanted to run, but each time I approached the door, another layer of the room's strange geometry revealed itself, making the distance stretch longer than it should, like the space was elastic and tightening around me. My phone vibrated again with another message despite having no signal. And when I looked at the screen, it displayed a photo of the back of my head taken only seconds earlier from a vantage point that didn't exist. I felt the presence behind me before I heard anything, a dense pressure pushing the air ahead of it, shaping the silence until it felt sharp enough to cut. The temperature dropped instantly, not in a natural draft, but in a focused wave that crawled up my spine and pooled at the base of my neck like a cold hand settling there. In the reflection of the blackened TV screen, I saw the outline of a figure standing inches behind me, tall and unmoving. But when I turned, the space was empty except for the lingering impression of something just having been there. My legs trembled, and I fell onto the bed, sinking deeper into the mattress than I should have, as if it were pulling me in slowly with a tired but determined grip. The room's silence shifted then, turning into a faint hum that vibrated through the floorboards, creating the sensation of being surrounded by voices humming in unison. Somewhere just out of earshot, a soft tapping began on the closet door, slow and deliberate, like knuckles testing the wood from the inside. And every nerve in my body screamed that opening it would be a mistake I couldn't reverse. The tapping grew faster and more agitated, matching the rhythm of my pulse, until it suddenly stopped, leaving behind a silence that felt even more threatening than the noise. I moved toward the closet despite myself, pulled by a sickening mix of fear and compulsion. And when my fingers touched the handle, the metal felt slick, as if someone else had been gripping it from the other side moments before. Before I could open it, the light in the room went dead, plunging me into a darkness so complete it felt physical, pressing against my eyes like thick cloth. Then came the faint sound of breathing close, steady, and definitely not mine, coming from somewhere just above my head. I didn't scream because the fear was so absolute it held my voice hostage, and all I could do was stand there, frozen, waiting to find out whether the dark intended to let me go. When the light snapped back on, the room looked unchanged, yet unmistakably altered, as if everything had shifted by a millimeter in the dark, enough for my body to sense the wrongness, even if my eyes couldn't pinpoint it. The closet door was now fully open without making a sound, revealing nothing inside but a faint smear on the back wall that looked too much like a handprint dragged downward by something desperate. I stepped back instinctively, but my heel hit something soft behind me, and when I turned, the bed seemed subtly higher than before, as though something beneath the mattress had risen to meet me. The photo of myself on the floor was now torn in half, and I didn't remember ripping it, which made the realization settle like cold metal in my stomach. The walls seemed to tighten inward, not visually, but atmospherically, pressing their weight on my lungs in a way that made breathing feel like swallowing thick air. From the far corner of the room came a low groan, not from the building, but from something that sounded like it had lungs, its exhale rough and uneven. The floor beneath me vibrated lightly, arrhythmic, like footsteps pacing below the surface, circling directly under where I stood. I grabbed my suitcase, intending to leave everything behind and run. But the zipper was rusted shut, even though hours earlier it had slid open with ease. Each window showed a different scene outside. One had a pitch-black night, one a fog-covered courtyard, and one reflected only the inside of the room, like a mirror refusing to show the real world. My reflection in the glass closest to me blinked a second too late, her delay more exaggerated now, her expression far more anxious than the one on my actual face. A faint rattle came from the radiator again, except now it sounded like someone knocking from inside the metal, tapping a slow pattern that sent chills all the way to my jaw. Suddenly, the floorboards near the doorway swelled upwards slightly, bending like they were being pushed from underneath, making the wood groan in a strained warning. I backed into the dresser, and its drawers slid open by themselves, revealing old clothing not belonging to me, dresses, letters, ribbons, all belonging to girls whose names were stitched inside in fading thread. On top of the pile was a small locket, dulled by time, and when I opened it, I found a photo of a girl who looked strikingly similar to me, with a date marked underneath that predated my birth. The hum in the room deepened into a vibration that resonated through my spine, making my teeth ache as if the air itself was grinding against my nerves. At the edge of my hearing, I caught the faint sound of footsteps approaching from outside the door, but they didn't sound like human walking. They were too slow, too heavy, too deliberate. The doorknob turned again, this time with full confidence, twisting all the way, as if the thing on the other side had finally learned how to use it after watching me earlier. I held my breath as the door eased open a few inches, but instead of revealing the hallway, it exposed yet another iteration of room 13, darker and more decayed, like a future version of the space I was standing in. The darker room's bed was stripped bare, its mattress stained, its walls peeling, and its single window blocked by boards hammered from the inside, as if someone had tried desperately to keep something out or in. A figure stood in the depth of that room's doorway, just barely visible, its posture slumped, but its presence unmistakably alert. And the moment its head began to tilt toward me, I slammed my own door shut. The door shuddered violently as soon as it closed, as if something from the darker version of the room had rushed forward and collided with it, eager to break through the thin barrier between us. The impact echoed through the boards beneath my feet, sending a trembling jolt up my legs that made my knees buckle, forcing me to brace myself against the dresser. My heartbeat grew so loud, it almost drowned out the faint scratching now coming from the inside of the doorframe. The scraping delicate at first, but increasing in urgency, as though fingernails were carving their way deeper into the wood. I stumbled backward, and the temperature dropped again, filling the air with a dense, metallic chill that tasted like old iron and made each breath sting in my throat. Behind me, the closet door creaked a fraction of an inch, not opening, but adjusting itself as though reacting to the movement in the room. Like it too was listening. The lights flickered once more, and in the brief moment of darkness, I felt a presence move across the floor, silent, deliberate, gliding instead of stepping. When the lights returned, the arrangement of objects in the room had subtly altered. The bed was angled differently. The suitcase had moved closer to the door, and the dresser drawers were shut tight again. I felt a pressure behind me, not touching, but looming. A heaviness that sank into my shoulder blades like someone leaning close enough to inhale the breath I exhaled. My phone vibrated once more, and when I picked it up, the screen displayed a live camera feed of the room, but from above, as though a ceiling camera watched me, even though I knew no such device existed. In the feed, a faint figure hovered inches behind me, its shape distorted like water-bending light, its outline human, but its face blurred beyond recognition. The feed suddenly glitched, and when it cleared, it showed me lying on the bed with my eyes closed, though I was standing, very much awake, and my body froze at the impossibility of the image. A low rumble spread through the floor, like many hands or limbs dragging underneath the wood. Their movement coordinated in a way that made my stomach twist with ancient dread. The wallpaper began to bubble outward, stretching as if something underneath pressed its shape into the fabric, trying to emerge into the room with me. I lunged for the window again, but this time the glass felt warm, pulsing lightly under my hand, almost gripping my palm in return before I snatched it away. The air thickened until my vision blurred at the edges, turning the room into a trembling tunnel of warped colors and bending light, as if the space were folding onto itself. I ran to the door, swung it open, and found, finally, the real hallway. But the relief lasted only a second, because the hallway lights flickered in a slow rhythm that matched the heartbeat pounding in my ears. I sprinted toward the staircase, but each step felt heavier, as though the building itself was trying to slow me down, pulling me deeper into the gravity of room 13. When I reached the exit, the caretaker stood there, eyes wide and face pale, muttering that he had warned the last girl too. But she never managed to leave until it was far too late. He looked at me with terror, not pity, saying I had the same look in my eyes the others had when the room followed them into the world outside, clinging to them like a parasite that doesn't understand boundaries. As I stepped into the daylight, feeling the warmth hit my skin, I realized the air behind me carried that same wrong heaviness from the room. And when I turned slightly, I swore I saw the faint imprint of a door marked 13 forming on the wall of the building across the street, waiting for me to come back.